So this is the second part of lecture 7, and we are now looking at form and function of intonation. So we need to know the following things. What is the form of intonation and what is the function of intonation? So I showed you two forms just now when we were looking at the pitch track. So you saw a falling tone and a rising tone. So we had a falling form and a rising form. The function of intonation is what these pitch patterns are doing, what they're indicating communicatively when we're speaking. So we want to know how the meaning of an utterance is affected by using different tones or different pitch patterns. And we can actually divide tones into many different groups. There are lots of different systems which look at intonation and which describe intonation patterns differently. But we're going to be looking at the one in Roach. That's the previous edition, sorry, it should say 2009 there. And he uses level and moving tones. It's also possible, for example, to use referring and proclaiming tones. This is actually within something called discourse analysis, discourse intonation from the work of David Brazel, which is very much linked up with discourse analysis. It's to do with the use of pitch to indicate meaning in spoken discourse. We're going to be looking a bit more at the form now, and we'll look at the function a bit later on. I'd like to go to the next slide now, please. May I? Okay. So, what I'd like you to do is think about these two words. First of all, would you agree that this word here and this word here are unambiguous in their meaning? Are you happy with those as words? So you know what they mean. Okay. So, using changes in intonation only, can you make no mean yes? And can you make yes mean no? Or can you make them more like the other one? Okay, have a go at this. I'm not going to do this for you now. This is something we'll do together in class. But I want you to see if you can alter the absolute meaning of the word, or if you can say them in a way which is absolutely yes and absolutely no. So have a think about how you might do that. So, a level tone on one syllable words can sound quite unnatural. So if I say yes, no, that sort of thing, it sounds unnatural. It sounds bored, it sounds disengaged. What we normally find are moving tones, so where the pitch moves from high to low, or low to high, or high, low, low, this kind of thing. So generally speaking, we find that the pitch moves when we're speaking. And a falling tone sounds very definite. So if I say something like he wanted to go to market, then that's what he wanted to do, no question. Whereas a rising tone will sound more open. So he wanted to go to market, then it sounds like I'm saying did he, or I'm questioning whether that was true, or I'm wanting you to say something after that. So a falling tone is going to sound definite, a rising tone is going to sound more open or questioning. And we also need to think about pitch height, which I tried to demonstrate in the first part of this and it didn't work with the real-time pitch display. In ordinary speech, intonation tends to take place in the lower part. So if this is my pitch range here, in fact we can see this on the screen. So if this is the high end of my pitch, high end, and the low end, then generally speaking my pitch patterns are going to be around the mid to low end of things. So a normal yes might look like this, yes. But an emphatic yes might look like this, yes, where I've got a much wider pitch range. If we wanted to indicate this kind of thing, then we could use an upward arrow. So this one is just saying yes, whereas this one is saying yes, because it indicates this with an upward pitch arrow. If we go back to the real-time pitch display, let's see if I can get this to do it. Okay, here we are. Okay, so let me do a normal yes, which is going to sound like this. Yes, 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 yes. yes. Okay, it's a bit slow. Yes, yes. Okay, so we can see we're kind of around the 250 hertz range there. Yes, yes, yes. But if I wanted to be more emotionally involved, then my pitch would go up much higher. Yes, 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 yes. Okay, I got it to do it eventually. So let's compare the two. Yes, yes, and pause. So this is my normal pitch range. Yes, yes, and that's my more emphatic pitch range, if you like. So you can see here that my normal pitch range is going to be around 250 hertz down to about 125 or so, whereas if I'm using an expanded pitch range, then I get up to about 350 hertz. I could go even higher, but I'm not going to trust this machine, and I've got the same ending, but I have a much wider range there, and this is going to sound more emphatic than the first one, as indicated. So, as for word stress, when we looked at word stress, it is possible to give some general rules about different tones, but the rules are very basic, and if you pick up some textbooks on this, for example O'Connor and Arnold's book on the intonation of colloquial English, which is a classic in the description of English intonation, we find that the rules are either very, very complicated, like they are in that book, or we have to stick to quite basic rules. And in English language teaching, we usually stick to fairly basic rules, but this doesn't really cover all the different nuances that we can get out of intonation. Now, what is the case is that learners of English need to be able to listen to colloquial English and interact with native speakers in order to be able to really learn intonation, to acquire, if possible, the patterns, to work out what's going on. So Roach says the best way to learn intonation is to go and live in the country whose language you wish to learn. This is probably the best way of learning language, full stop. But certainly surrounding yourself with the patterns is going to help you to understand how they're used, and with any luck eventually to use them that way yourself, although you do have to be quite self-analytical as a learner in order to improve pronunciation at any level. Okay, so we're going to use various symbols for representing different sorts of tones. The level tone is going to be represented by a high level line like this. So this is going to be yes. The fall is going to be indicated by a pitch mark which is moving from top left to bottom right on this side where we put a stress mark. Yes. The rise is going to move from bottom left to top right. Yes. The fall rise moves down and goes upwards again. Yes. And the rise fall goes upwards and then down. Yes. Okay, I'd like you just to say those with me. Let's try. Yes. 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 So in each case I've placed the symbol in the position where we would normally have a stress mark, and if you have one of these symbols you don't need to have the stress mark as well. Roach puts these at the bottom. In this system it doesn't really matter where they are, but there are other systems where it does matter. In this one all I'm interested in is whether you can identify a fall or a rise, for example. I'm not interested in whether you can identify a lowish fall and a highish fall like the ones I just showed you on the pitch screen. Okay, let's see if I can get these to animate. Oh, press the button again. So let's do this again. So I'm going to do a level tone followed by a falling tone followed by a rising tone followed by a fall rise followed by a rise fall. Here we go. Yes. Yes. Let's do that one again. Yes. 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 Okay, so level tone, yes. Falling tone, yes. rising tone, yes. It's not a very good one. Rising tone again, yes. Falling rising, yes. And rising falling, yes. And that is what they look like. Okay. So, as I said, we can attribute some functions, but this is very, very basic. It's really basic. It doesn't really cover everything that's going on. So, the falling tone is most commonly associated with a statement in English, with a truth statement if you like. It starts relatively high and ends low. It's also the neutral tone. If something sounds like a statement, I've used a fall. It's used to indicate new information. It gives an air of finality. I've got to the end of what I'm saying. And it's often used in WH questions, questions that start with where, which, what, why, those sorts of questions. Okay, so I'm going to say these and I'd like you to say them after me. No. Yes. Well. Good. Okay, now we're going to say them again with emphasis. No. Yes. Well. Good. And now we're going to say them with a very, very narrow pitch range. No. Yes. Well. Good. And if I compare one of those words with the different pitch ranges, so starting with the narrow and then moving on to the normal, let's say, and then moving on to the higher pitch range, it starts starting here as follows. No. 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 It really doesn't like those very high ones. Let's do that again. No. 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 Okay. So the rise, some functions, it starts low and ends relatively high. That's the form. It's often used to show that something more is coming. So I haven't finished speaking. If I'm doing a list, for example, I might use rising tones before I get to the end where I'd use a for. It's used to indicate given information or common ground, so things that I assume as a speaker are things that we know about that are already held in a conversation, and it can be used to encourage someone to continue or show the hearer is listening and expects something more to come. It's also commonly used in yes-no questions, questions that start with an auxiliary verb. Okay, so let's try this. Do a kind of lowish rise and then a highish rise. Are you ready? After me. No. Yes. Well. Good. Okay, and now a higher one. No. Yes. Well. Good. Okay, let's look at the pitch patterns of those. So I'll do a low one and then a high one. No. No. Let's do that again, see if I can get it a bit more clear. No. No. Okay, we've got this kind of pitch halving thing going on here. So this is the lower one and then the higher one. Let's ignore this line there. Okay. So here are some examples of where we might see them used in discourse. So if A says, excuse me, and B says, yes, then you've asked me a question, what do you want? Then A says, do you know John Smith? And if B says, yes, then it invites A to continue. Oh, well that's nice. Or something similar. However, if A says, do you know John Smith? And B says, yes, then that kind of makes it difficult for speaker A to continue. Yes, I do, and end of story, basically. So communicatively, the falling tone is closing off the conversation. It's quite possible that speaker A could continue, but they're not really invited to do so. Okay, here's another example. Have you seen Anne? No implies that B is interested in the whereabouts of Anne, whereas have you seen Anne? No implies that B is not interested, hasn't seen Anne, doesn't care. So we've got this closing off with a falling tone versus a expectation that the conversation will continue with a rising tone. Okay, some functions of the fall rise. This is a very, very common tone in British English. We don't find it quite so much in American English. It starts high and ends high, so it goes from a high pitch, falls to a low pitch, and then rises again. It's also used to indicate given information, like the rising tone or common ground, so indicates that it's something that I believe we have together in common in the conversation. It can be a kind of politeness marker. Very often it's used to indicate, well, I kind of agree, but I don't want to be rude enough to say that I'm not really very sure. And it can imply reservation. So it's a bit like saying yes but or no but. It's that kind of thing. Okay, so I'm going to produce these now, and I want you to say them after me with a full rise. No, yes, well, good. Okay, let's look at those on the real-time pitch. No, see if I can get a better one. No, yes, well, good. Okay, you get the general idea when we've got this falling and rising. Good, so that's what's going on in that last pitch event there. So, as an example, if A says, do you think this is a good idea? And B says, yes, then they actually don't really think it's a very good idea. They don't want to say no, but they're really saying no with the pitch of their voice. So when you think about those yeses and nos that we had earlier, this is where this comes into play. However, if A said, do you think this is a good idea? And B said, yes, then they would really think it was a good idea. If A says, this outfit isn't very expensive, and B says, no, then it's a bit like, well, it's too expensive for me, might not be expensive for you, so there's reservation in this. Just a couple of examples of how that's used. Finally, the rise fall, actually this isn't finally, we're going to look at the level tone as well. So the rise fall doesn't occur as often as the tone mentioned above, nothing like as often, and in fact in many cases it's not recommended that this is taught to non-native speakers. It can actually sound quite sarcastic and rude, which is one of the reasons why it's low incidence. So it starts low and it ends low, and it can be used to show strong feelings of surprise, approval or disapproval. It's also quite gossipy, and it sounds like this. Are you ready? No. Yes. Well. Good. Okay, let's look at that on the real-time pitch. No. Yes. Well. Good. Okay, let's compare that with no. No. So you can really see there the pitch differences. This is no, falling, rising, and this is no, rising, falling. So, examples of this pitch pattern. Did you know Jerry was a secret lemonade drinker? No. So, gossip. Tell me more. A says, isn't the view lovely? And B says, yes. Strongly agreeing. So it's a strong emotional kind of tone. Finally, the level tone. This is often used to show boredom or routine. So we had one of these earlier on in the lectures. Also used for lists of things, but I can use a rise there as well. Students answering a register at the start of a class, which is quite a routine sort of thing to do, may well use a level tone. So try this after me. No. Yes. Well. Good. Okay, and let's have a look at this on here. No. Yes. Well. Good. Okay, when I say yes. Yes, can you see we get funny things happening? That's because it's a fricative noise. It's not showing the pitch because it's a voiceless sound basically, but we're getting other things going on with the software there. Okay, right, so do the tasks on your handout. That will be the next thing to do in class, and so we're going to focus just on those first, and then we're going to move on to the tone unit, which will be the next part of the lecture.